Good afternoon, everybody.
Pleasant good afternoon, Ms. Edwards. Welcome.
Good evening.
Ladies, thank you so much for your patience this evening. Our facilitator, Ms. Edwards, have now joined. So without any further delay, we'll allow Ms. Edwards to get straight in our presentation. Kindly remember, all questions will be taken after Ms. Edwards' presentation. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon again, everyone. I was having a slight technical difficulties, but I'm going to continue. So without further ado, I'm just going to pick up from last week so we can wrap it up so we can start soil health. Let's pray that nothing else goes wrong. All right. All right. So let me start the slideshow. So last week, we ended off the session with talking about sustainable agriculture strategies, right? And today we're going to continue by talking about some of those strategies that can assist in sustainable agriculture practices. All right, forgive me for not sharing my video. Just having a bit of technical difficulties, but I know you can see the PowerPoint, and that's the most important thing. Everyone can see the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. All right, so some of the strategies when we talk about in sustainable agriculture, crop rotation is one. And when we talk about crop rotation, we're basically talking about cycling your crop. And the cycling of your crop could be for many reasons. One, you just had a heavy feeder and you have to replenish the soil, or you have a crop that is affected by a pest and a disease, right? So you would cycle it. So let's say, for example, you have a solanaceous crop growing, and let's say it's affected by maybe bacterial wilt or a pest. What you would do, you would basically not plant back anything in the solanaceous family. And we're talking about solanaceous family, we're talking about things like peppers, tomatoes, eggplant. So you would plant back something from a different family. Perhaps cucurbits family, which would be cucumber, watermelon, and so on, right? So these are some examples here of crop rotation. Right, so let's get into integrated pest management. When folks hear about integrated pest management, sometimes they think this is a situation where you cannot use chemical, right? But your first resort should not be using chemical, right? Your first resort is to see what you can use, either a cultural practice, a biological practice, or some biopesticides, right? Sorry about that. Or some biopesticides. So when we talk about integrated pest management, it combines the use of biological, cultural, and chemical practices to control insect pests in agriculture production. So IPM should not be confused with just using organic practice only, but your first resort should be not using chemicals. So if you have a pest on your crop, chemical should not be the first resort. You should do some research and see what's the ideal thing that you can use. But before we even get into talking about pests and disease on your crop, we must focus on biosecurity measures. Biosecurity measures must be put in place, whereas you don't eat in your garden, you don't carry other fruits and vegetables into your garden, those sort of things. And we'll expand a bit further down, right? I'm just gonna run through this today because we need to start soil health, right? Early monitoring is very important. You check under the leaf, you check the plant, you monitor them, and you would be able to identify if they are being affected by any pest or any sort of disease. So you would look under the leaf for things like aphids. You would look at the leaf and see if they have tunnel or this white line going through the middle of the leaf. So that would be things like leaf miner. You will look to see if the leaf is curling, could be an incidence of mites and those sort of things. If they have holes, it can be caterpillar and so on, right? So some cultural control for when you have pests and diseases. First thing, cultural control and non-chemical practices. They reduce the pest establishment. So they reduce the pest load, right? By reducing reproduction, dispersal, and survival. right? So one of the things that we normally use for cultural practice is the sticky traps, right? So you can buy the sticky traps or you can make the sticky traps. Now the sticky traps comes in two colors, yellow and blue. The yellow is normally attracted to things like white fly and aphids and those sort of things. And the blue one, as you can see in the picture, is attracts things like leaf miners and thrips. But before you talk about anything, field hygiene is important. You can't have all bits of scraps in your garden. You can't be throwing out garbage out the house into the garden, right? So you have to ensure that the area is clean. You can't be in the garden and decide you're going to eat a pack of cricks and you push the paper in a corner there somewhere about in the garden. All these things will attract pests and diseases too. So you have to ensure that field hygiene is important. Not because it's outside and it's growing, you're going to throw bits and pieces of metal here and all these sort of things. Field hygiene is very, very important. Keep it clean, right? Some other cultural practices, I know these days we're affected by slugs, so we can use things. I know some people use salt, some people use slug bait. You can use things like copper wire that you'll get from an old fan. You could throw them down in the field. Normally, they kind of interfere with the slugs, so it sends them an electrical charge and they actually are deterred from that area, right? If you have things like bats and birds, you can basically use things like old CD player because of the reflection that will scare them off, especially in the night when the bats are out there. That reflection will scare them off. Plastic bags are normally used in fields, your pigeon peas field, fruit trees to scare off things like birds, because when they flap in the wind, it normally scare off birds, right? And there's also biological control. And I know you would have known about some biological control. I mean, years ago when we had the pink mealybug, the biological control was the ladybug beetle, right? To help to keep them under control, right? But seeing that we're talking about pink mealybug, I will share with Latoya a video that I recently viewed in St. Lucia where they were talking about there might be there is breadfruit mealybug in St. Lucia. And you know, breadfruit is one of the things in St. Vincent that we term as, well, used to term long ago as poor people food. Breadfruit is no longer poor people food. Paying $8 for breadfruit, but it's something that if you have a tree, you can share with the community. And the last thing we want in terms of food security is that our breadfruit being wiped out by a disease, pest, sorry, right? Then you have chemical controls. When you talk about chemical control, the first thing you focus on are biopesticides, right? And if you look at my pictures, based on different pesticide label, they are labeled according to color. So you have green, which is slightly hazardous. Those are biopesticide. Then you have moderately hazardous, highly hazardous, or extremely hazardous, right? So you start off using green, focus on green. So normally with my students, I use things like neem, neem X, nimbicide. Garland is excellent when you're going to, if you have things like nematodes, Garland is really excellent for that. And so you try to use what is natural. I don't want to use the word organic, but what is natural, what doesn't have a high toxicity that will affect your plants and may affect you as well, right? So you try to use what is natural, right? So in the next slide, you'll see some examples when you get the slide of home remedies you can do using neem. You can use things like dishwashing liquid and water to basically dry up things like aphids, or blast the aphids and white fly with hose, so it will actually wash them away, right? So you, on these rest presentation, you would see some homemade organic or natural pesticides that you can use. You can use red peppers, hot peppers, right? This is ideal for if you have things like ants, aphids, leafhopper, spider mites, especially in tomato where spider mites is a problem. You can use a marigold, right? So you can use these in tomatoes and beans where you may have things like fungal diseases, right? You can use your wood ash, and wood ash is an excellent potassium, and we will get into that when we get into soil health, once the PowerPoint shows, right? There's baking soda spray, which is excellent for powdery mildew. When you see those white spots on your cucurbits, you can use these baking soda spray, right? Companion planting, very important. I sent you a sheet that has some companion planting. One of the some of the benefits of companion planting is deterring pests. When you put certain herbs with certain crops, it can help to deter pests, right? It attracts, some of these herbs also bear flowers, which will attract pollinators, beneficial insect. Some companion plants act as shade regulation, so provide shade for the smaller plants. The larger plants provide shade for the smaller plants. Then you have natural support, so like when you plant corn and beans together, so the beans would run up on the corn, or the butternut squash will run up on the corn, and you have the three sisters, which is butternut squash, beans, and corn. It also improves plant health and even improves soil health, because you have where it's the nitrogen fixing bacteria would add back nitrogen to the soil, right? They also weed suppression. So if you plant things like sweet potatoes, peanuts, all these are like ground cover, so they help to suppress weed, right? So your main aim here is to maximize land use, right? Sweet potato. So just giving you an example of what my grandfather used to do in a given area, and I think I mentioned it last class, where you use sweet potato, corn, pigeon peas, and cassava. The corn would be the first one coming out, and it would help to deter the rats. And then you have the sweet potato followed by the pigeon peas and the cassava. And you know the pigeon peas is going to add back nutrients to the soil. So in a nutshell, with companion planting, not only that it deter pests and it add benefit to the soil, but you help to use one small area, because each different plants have different spacing. So you could use a small area and have proper spacing with ventilation and be able to maximize that area, right? For your home use. Right? Biosecurity measures, very, very important. Implementation of biosecurity measures along the production chain minimize the risk of introduction of new pathogens into the farm, right? As well as the spread of disease to the farm. So some biosecurity measures. At the entrance, you must have one entrance. Always have one entrance. Ideal to have one entrance, not having people entering your farm from many different locations. So provide a footbath at the entrance of your farm or into your greenhouse, right? So that individual, if they are coming from somewhere that they may have pests on the shoes, or they're coming from their own farm and you don't know what they're bringing with them, when they walk through the water that has in some sort of disinfectant solution, they will be able to remove whatever pest or kill whatever pest may be on their shoes, right? Limited non-essential traffic on the farm. Even though you're growing strawberries or something that is attractive, limit the amount of people coming on your farm, because the more people come on your farm, it's going to be exposed to many pests and many different types of disease. Keep a record of all visitors who visit your farm, right? As I mentioned before, have only one entrance and keep all other animal and strangers off the property, right? So in wrapping up, sustainable agriculture is essential for ensuring the future of Caribbean food security and economic stability, right? So we must adopt environmental friendly practices in the region so we can build a more resilient agriculture system, right? You must invest in these practices. After you start, it may seem hard at first, but once you practice, it becomes, easy, right? Even investing in some of the technologies, you know that these technologies, such as your agri-tower or your Dutch bucket system or your hydroponic system or aquaponic system, they will pay for themselves, right? Collaboration is very, very important, right? Just like how we are collaborating here, we have a session going on by Helen's daughter. This is the area where you can network, so you can reach out to one another and have collaboration, share information, share experience, and those sort of things. If somebody have some information on class that you can visit that class for maybe financial literacy or providing funding or any collaboration is very, very important. So don't be selfish. Always think about sharing with your fellow farmers, right? This is just an example of crop family, because you would hear me talking about solanaceous crops, brassica crops, cucurbit crops, and so on. So this is an example so you can know or make yourself familiar so that when I'm talking about them, you will know what crops I'm talking about. And that's it for the first segment. And I'm going to start soil health. So just give me a second. Let me share the screen. Just give me 1 second. Let me share.
Ms. Edwards, everything okay?
Yeah, I'm about to load it now. It's just giving me a bit of problems to load. I'm not sure why.
Okay, fabulous.
Supposed to load now. Not sure why I'm not seeing the mouse to load anything. Oh Lord.
Okay, we are now seeing it. If this is the one you are looking at,
Yes.
okay.
All right. So folks, let me tell you what happened a little bit earlier when I loaded my PowerPoint. Everything literally was jumbled all over the place. It disappeared and then I started having internet issues. So let's hope that we get to the end of this session tonight. All right, so let's talk a bit about soil health, right? So when we talk about soil health, we're talking about basically the health of the soil. And that is very important. So by the end of the session, you should be able to define soil health, identify some key challenges affecting soil health in the Caribbean, discuss various management techniques, which I have about 4 or 5, evaluate the effectiveness of soil conservation practices, such as things like covering crop and contour farming, and apply your knowledge to soil health. right? So soil health is basically the capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem. It supports plant growth, animal habitats, and human needs. So some of the key characteristics of soil health is having balanced nutrients. Just think about us, right? If we are lacking in certain nutrients, we are going to either, let's say, for example, you're lacking in vitamin C, you could end up as long ago scurvy, vitamin A, night blindness, these sort of things. So think about our body in terms of we need a balanced meal or the proper nutrients in our body to grow, right? So when you have proper soil health, you'll have good water retention, proper moisture for the crop, and a thriving good ecosystem. And especially when you're talking about the soil, you will see a healthy soil in terms of its soil color and those sort of things. So 5 soil health principles. Use plant diversity to increase the diversity in the soil. So you add in different types of plant, meaning you have those that add nitrogen to the soil, those that add organic matter in terms of when they break down, those that you add as soil cover to help to keep the moisture and those sort of things in the soil, right? Manage the soil more without disturbing them. So we will talk a bit about no-till farming, which is very ideal, especially if your land is a sloping area and you're not going to, do contour, right? And you're going to plant some stuff. As I mentioned last class, ideal to plant in a sloping land is pineapple, so it can hold in place. Also, you can plant coconut trees around the edge so you can actually tie that soil into place, right? So if you have a soil like that, you will not disturb it by tilling it. You would basically do no-till farming, right? Keep your plant growing throughout the year so that they can feed the soil. Oftentimes, if you take good care of your plant, especially tomato plant, you can have them growing throughout the year. That require pruning, proper care, proper method of harvesting, not pulling from the plants and all those sort of things, right? And I will touch that on the last day of my session, right? Keep the soil covered as much as possible to prevent things like soil erosion. Integrate livestock to recycle nutrients back into the soil. So a healthy soil has good water infiltration because of the soil aggregation. When the soil is not don't have a healthy soil, you don't have the movement of water, you don't have the soil aggregation. The soil basically look like sand, it's fine, it's easy to be compacted and those sort of things. So biological activity is very important in the soil. Earlier this week, I saw an article by an Asbot News Network, and he was talking about the benefits of worms in the soil. And I find that rather interesting that a news site is actually bringing information like that. And that shows that we are focused on 1, sustainable agriculture, 2, CW Caribbean Week of Agriculture is around the corner. So yeah, we start talking about these things. So yes, bring the awareness to individuals, right? So the importance of soil health in the Caribbean. Caribbean soil face a lot of challenges like soil degradation, erosion, nutrient depletion. And when we talk about nutrient depletion, right, we must remember that nitrogen is one of the most limiting nutrients in the soil. You can apply nitrogen this morning, not cover the nitrogen, and leave it, sun come out, exposed, that evaporates, gone. It does not go to the plant. It's gone. It's literally gone. So when we even talk about applying fertilizer, we have to take into consideration how we apply fertilizer. And it's not ideal to do this broadcasting because we're going to be broadcasting for weeds and all these sort of things, right? So at the end, I'll give you some idea of how to apply fertilizer. Deep placement is one. I really don't forward the foliar application. Yes, a lot of people do, but I look at it as this. For example, the only time I need drips is if I'm sick and I can't take in food orally, right? So drips. So plants are designed to take up food from the root, not through the stomata. So adding the same liquid fertilizer to the root is what I do. Understand? The other methods in terms of ring placement or band placement. In your large trees, I normally do things like the spikes that feed up to 6 months, a slow release. That is what I do. And when you are applying fertilizer to the tree, right, you don't go to the root and apply. So you go to the end where the branches are, and that's where the root tips are, and that is where you would apply your fertilizer. So you'll fork, put the fertilizer in the ground and cover it back. Ensure that you cover it back because remember that nitrogen is easy to evaporate, right? Proper soil management is vital for sustainable agriculture. which we talk about long-term productivity, ensuring food security within the region, mitigating the impacts of climate change, because you know the soil is one of the places where it's a carbon sink, where carbon are actually stored, right? So improper land management can lead to significant soil erosion, because if one of the things I normally see with farmers, they get a piece of land, somebody gave them a purchase land, the first thing to do is remove the trees. Incorrect. You should not do that. We have to think about agroforestry. Agroforestry is very important and one of the most important components of soil health, right? So removing the trees could lead to soil erosion because the trees is gone, the soil sometimes become bare, then you're going to start adding all different sorts of fertilizer to that soil, all different sort of chemicals, and it can lead to things like soil erosion, reduced soil fertility, and all those sort of things, and we would expand a bit more below. Right, so this stress is important, and one stress is important of adopting sustainable soil management practices to protect agricultural productivity, right? So the impact of soil degradation, loss of soil fertility. So soil degradation leads to the depletion of essential nutrients in the soil, reducing the soil ability to support a healthy growing plant. So sometimes you're growing plants and you realize, it's stunted, this ain't happening. I urge you to do soil tests or look at the color of your soil. And we would, as I said, we'll explain in depth below, right? Erosion, topsoil, the most fertile layer of the soil is oftentimes washed away, right? Soil salination, and especially along the coastal areas, right? One of the things I want to stress on, mangrove is very important, and this helps to basically prevent coastal indentation in terms of the water coming into the island, salt water coming on the island, because when you have salt water encroaching, then we're going to have things like soil salination and those sort of things. And when the soil becomes saline, it's hard to basically rectify. It takes a longer time for the soil to rectify when you have salt built up in the soil. And when you have salt built up in the soil, you don't get the nutrients releasing to the plants. It's basically tied into the soil. Deforestation, as I mentioned a while ago, deforestation, removing of trees when you start farming a land is not ideal, right? Keep the trees there because one, it helps to create a microclimate. It's a windbreak, so it helps to prevent the drastic wind movement that could actually reduce your yield by knocking off the blossom. It will cause, once you don't have windbreaks, you're going to have a high amount of transpiration of water and water loss, and then the drying out of the soil and all these sort of things. So keeping the trees is very, very important, right? Climate change, extreme weather patterns. Extreme weather patterns, such as intense rainfall and prolonged drought, basically cause soil to lose a lot of its nutrients, because you're going to have constant leaching, you're going to have erosion occurring, and you're going to have a lot of soil degradation occurring. Causes, right? Deforestation, which we mentioned before, overgrazing, unsustainable farming practice. And I want to spend some time on that, right? Unstable farming practice, such as overuse of different chemical fertilizers or improper use of even chemicals, right? As I mentioned last class, sometimes it's to use 5 ml to a gallon and you use 20 ml to a gallon because you think more is best, right? And this excessive amount of chemicals sometimes kills off the biological or the microorganisms in the soil, leading to no activity, and eventually you will have a depleted soil of nutrients, and it's going to be lost from things like organic matter, right? Soil erosion from removing all the trees, urbanization. That is happening rapidly. You move into an area, you buy a piece of land and you remove all the trees. Nobody leave trees around the household anymore. They're not even taking into consideration with trees around your home will reduce the energy level, because one, it will create a microclimate, keep your home cool. They would have to use less fan, less AC, and nobody's taking that into consideration anymore, right? As we mentioned a while ago, climate change, extreme weather events, heavy rain, drought, basically accelerate things like erosion on landslides and those sort of things, which further depletes the soil of its nutrients and moisture. So soil degradation, I'm going to take you through this. Look at this picture. Look at the color of the soil, right? It's looking pale. You may think that this soil has just been weeded. It wasn't weeded. This is the result of constant use of chemicals and chemical fertilizer over a period of 10 years. Eventually, there's nothing growing. So when you decide to till this soil, which I hope this, oh my Lord, this video plays, which it doesn't look like it's going to play, you would see that soil is actually going to be light. It's going to be flying. It's going to be like, it's going to be dusty. I'm going to send you back the video so that you can see, right? Now, with a soil like this, we would think, what would you do? Add in organic matter. Once you add organic matter, you're going to see the change in the soil color and everything, right? So, number one technique for maintaining healthy soil, organic amendment. So you can do your composting, you can add your rabbit dung, you can add your sheep and goat dung, and you can even add cow dung. These are whole manure. You can add them and plant them at the same time. So when you add organic matter, it enhances soil structure. So where before, when the soil was depleted of organic matter, it would be light. It would be like sand. You can go and grab up some with your hand and it would just be dusty. When I would like you to see that video when we were tilling that soil, it was just blowing all over the place like crazy. It was like a dust, right? It was blowing constantly and it messed up the entire mesh for the greenhouse and all those sort of things. Now, with a soil like that, as I said, you add organic matter and you would see the changes occurring because you would eventually start seeing the soil being aggregated. Now, when a soil is depleted of nutrients, or when we want to say the soil is somewhat dead, but you can bring it back to life in terms of adding organic matter. So how do you know if your soil is healthy? If you dig 12 inches into the soil and you cannot find at least 2 or 4 earthworms, then you have problems, right? When you have a soil like what I show you in the first picture, sometimes when you wet it, when you wet that soil, when you water those plants, it does not actually hits the root. It actually just wet on top and it eventually runs off, right? So you want to have a problem with actually irrigating that soil or irrigating that plant properly. So hence the reason it's going to have stunted growth. You're not going to have any nutrients in the soil, right? So the nutrient supply, once you have organic matter, it provides essential nutrients with improved soil fertility over a period of time, reducing the need for synthetic fertilizer, right? Sustainable farming, incorporate compost into farming practices. Now it's easy to do compost. You harvest and you take those waste that you harvest and you create a compost heap. You can use a bin. I can send pictures for you how you can use a bin and create as a compost bin, but you must utilize what comes from your farm in terms of recycling it back into your farm. So composting techniques and addition of organic manure has been successfully used to enhance crop production by improving soil health and reducing the reliance on chemical fertilizer. So let's hope this one plays. So before, you can see in these, you can see the change in the soil color. So and I'm grateful that I made it here. Yesterday it's gone, and a new day has appeared. And I'm grateful that I made it here. Right, so you can see the change in the soil color here, right? And obviously they will have proper growth occurring, right? So you look at your soil color. This is it before organic matter, and look at it after. After one addition of organic matter, you start seeing a change in the soil. You start seeing aggregation in the soil. So once your soil is aggregated, that means it have clumps, it's going to be easy of water to infiltrate to the soil. When the soil doesn't have any clump, it's fine. It becomes like a shield, so the water doesn't go through, just the top is looking wet. And if you dig that soil after, you would see that underneath is dry. So looking at the soil, you can actually be able to identify. So one of the things I tell my students, first thing before we start doing any sort of practical, look at the soil, look at the color of the soil. What is that an indication of? Look at the weeds or the plant that is on the soil. If the weeds are even yellow, that shows it is depleted in some sort of nutrients, most likely nitrogen, right? So you look at the soil, you look at the size of the leaf and those sort of things, right? This wasn't supposed to be here. All right, some techniques for maintaining healthy soil, agroforestry. And what is agroforestry? Simple. You have an area of land, and this used to happen most time long ago. Farmers never used to remove all the trees just to plant an area of tomato or area, but you would have trees in between. You'll have an avocado tree here, you'll have another tree here, and so on. Yes, you have to be careful what trees you put in, because sometimes these trees can actually give whatever vegetables you implement there disease. But you're trying to create a microclimate and sustainable, because you know, when the leaf from these trees fall, that's organic matter goes back to the soil, right? Organic matter added to the soil, you're going to improve the structure and the texture of the soil, which is very important, right? And then you have the trees, it forms as a windbreak, it forms as a way to actually help for water to percolate through the soils, because when you have trees and there's a lot of heavy rain, the water go down instead of run off, so it will not run off to cause things like soil erosion, right? It helps to stabilize the soils in terms of integrating trees into the farming system, stabilize the soil so you do not have a lot of landslide and those sort of things. It prevent erosion, right? As I mentioned before, it prevents things like windbreak, and it promotes biodiversity. These trees, flowers, it has a habitat for different types of birds and different types of animals. So it creates a nice biodiversity. It creates a nice microclimate. You can see anywhere trees are, it's cooler. So you want to have a nice cool area, but take into consideration, we don't want to have a dense area where we cannot get sunlight going to our plants. So that's why you have to prune over a period of time so sunlight can go to your plant. But you want to limit the amount of intensity of the sunlight on the plant in terms of to reduce things like transpiration and those sort of things. Right? So this is just an example here of agroforestry, right? And as I mentioned before, it increase organic matter, it supports soil biology, it improves soil structure, and also increase the water holding capacity of the soil, right? So some other techniques is things like cover crop, right? So a cover crop is basically a plant that is used to slow down erosion. So cover crops could be things like peanuts, it could be things like pumpkin running on top of this, pumpkin vine running on top of the soil. It could be things like cabbage plant at a close proximity, a close spacing, right? It can be things like sweet potato, which is an excellent cover crop. It can be things like peanuts and those sort of things. So these are some examples of cover crops, right? So it prevents things like soil erosion. And after harvesting it, this add back organic matter to the soil, right? So it helps in actually boosting the soil health, reduce the need for chemical inputs, and sustainable, it leads to a sustainable farming practice. So this is an example. So you have here sweet potato and you have peanuts. So beans, sweet potato, peanuts. All right. Mulching, very, very important. And I encourage a lot of people to do mulching, especially when you're growing things like tomatoes, especially in the dry season, because one of the things with tomatoes, if you don't have adequate water or adequate moisture in the soil, it reduces the uptake of calcium to the plant, right? And when the uptake of calcium occur, you're going to end up having a deficiency in calcium, so it leads to blossom end rot. And you don't want to have blossom end rot because it makes your crop unable to sell your crop. It cannot be consumed. It's horrible, so nobody's going to buy that from you. So what is mulching? Mulching is basically the process of covering the ground with some sort of material. It can be ground cover. It can be the plastic that a lot of people use. I personally don't like it, but the plastic that a lot of people use. It can be organic, such as maybe coconut branch, banana leaves, newspaper, cardboard, wood chip, right? These are the things that you can use as mulch, right? So when you add mulch, it helps to maintain soil moisture. And you don't only use mulch when you're doing vegetables, but when you plant young sapling, a young tree, you can mulch it to prevent weeds from competing to keep suck the nutrients, and also in terms of cleaning and swiping, in terms of if it mulches around that area, it prevents you from going close to the tree with a weed whacker, right? The plant with a weed whacker. So it helps to conserve moisture, right? Reducing the amount of evaporation of water from the soil. It helps to also suppress weed. So these are some important components. It will reduce the amount of time that you would spend weeding your crop, right? So as I said, farmers can use things like banana leaf. You can use coconut branches, right? So mulch could be broken down into organic mulch and inorganic mulch. So organic mulch would be like your lawn clippings, your newspaper, coconut trees, branch, banana leaves, and those sort of things. Cardboard, those sort of things. Inorganic mulch would be the plastic that a lot of people use, or the ground cover, or the agri-fabric that's a lot of other individuals use. I prefer using the agri-fabric. Yes, it's breathable, and sometimes we run into situation where weeds grow up between the agri-fabric, but it also allows for water penetration when rain comes, for water to percolate through the soil, right? This is just some of the example of organic mulches. You have cardboard, you have newspaper, and you have lawn clippings. And if you notice in the last picture, even though we mulch the tomatoes and so on, we don't take the mulch right up to the root, because excessive moisture could also cause the root to rot, right? So you don't put the mulch right up around the root. You leave some space there. That space could also be for providing fertilizer and so on to that crop. So this is just some other example of organic mulch. So in the first one, we have bamboo leaf, we have banana leaf between some corn, and you can use dried banana leaf, right? Inorganic mulch, the plastic one, and the agri-fabric. So over the two first pictures are the plastic mulch, and the last one is the agri-fabric. Some other techniques for maintaining healthy soil to prevent things like soil erosion, or even water retention, or sustainable use of the land. So we have contour farming, which is when you have a sloping land and you're farming alongside and not downward. So you're farming across, right? Across so these are when you go and you see things like your sweet potato region forest system. That is some example of contour farming, right? And that's an example there. You would see it also with dashing production, sweet potato production, and so on. No-till farming, another important one. So this is minimal disturbance of the soil. So you have, as I said, sloping lands, and you want to just plant something. What you normally do, you dig that hole. You don't till that entire area. You just dig that hole that you're going to plant. So you can plant things like corn, tomato, anything that bear above the ground, right? Corn, tomato, peppers, pineapple, all these sort of things you can do with no-till farming. So no-till farming could occur where you have also lands that are waterlogged. So you don't want to continuously till that soil, and once you have a waterlogged soil, it's ideal to do no-till farming. Or if you have a sloping land, it's ideal to do no-till farming so you do not disturb the soil, right? So minimal soil disturbance is very important. One, to prevent things like erosion, and also to improve your soil health, right? So you could start adding organic matter around that area, could mulch that area, and that will basically help, right? So some examples of no-till farming. Here's a picture where we level the area, put down ground cover, and we just dig holes and plant pineapple. I'm not sure if the video will play. I doubt. Okay. Yes. So the area is leveling, and you use a soil agar to basically create the holes.
Look when that body's make you dance. I'm not for the voice you say. Just keep moving. Figure it out, figure it out, but don't stop moving, go, go, go. Figure it out, figure it out. You can do this.
Right? So basically, this is an example. What you do, you level the area and we covered it. And we basically cut the holes in the ground cover and you use the soil agar. And the soil agar is attached to basically a hand drill and you create the holes. So you're only tilling the area where you're going to plant your stuff and you can plant your peppers, you can plant your tomato, you can plant your eggplant, whatever the case may be. And here you will have an example of no-till farming, right? So soil fertility. Soil fertility and soil health goes hand in hand, right? Fertile soil can produce healthy food with all the necessary requirement for a healthy person. Soil fertility is the ability to sustain plant growth by providing all the essential nutrients, right? Without adding excessive amounts of chemicals or synthetic fertilizer and those sort of things. What we need to focus on is the macronutrients that is needed, which is NP and K, and also focus on the micronutrients. Oftentimes, we put number one focus on the macronutrients, not focusing on the micronutrients. And we go to the agriculture input warehouse or the plant shop and we just buy fertilizer without even consideration of the grade of fertilizer in terms of the number that is on the bag. And sometimes you see 12, 12, 24 plus 2 MgO, that is magnesium oxide. So that is a micronutrient. Or if you're going to buy something like Agassiz or cytokine, or there are many other liquid fertilizer today that are what you would call plant biostimulant or plant booster. They have a lot of micronutrients in them, and these micronutrients are very, very important. Whereas when you need N, nitrogen for leafy growth, right? P, phosphorus for proper root formation, and K, potassium for fruiting and flowering. You need to also focus on things like boron, because you can plant out a tray of seedlings of cabbage, and it's green challenger, which is a green cabbage, but all the seedlings are purple. That's a deficiency in boron, right? Then you can have your tomatoes growing on the tree, and then it has it looking like it rub against the branch, but it didn't rub, right? So it have all these scabs on it, and that is now another deficiency in boron. Or you could plant lettuce and all the tip of the lettuce is brown, and that's tip burning. That's because your soil is deficient in things like calcium, right? So you have to take all these in consideration. You have a cornfield growing and all the tip of the corn leaves are brown and it's calling and it has some slight bit of purple. No, that's a deficiency in things like sulfur and those sort of things. So you not only have to focus on the macronutrients, but focus on the micronutrients is very, very important, right? So soil fertility in the Caribbean, right? General soil fertility, the Caribbean soils vary in fertility, but many regions face challenges such as poor nutrient retention, right? Because of maybe this type of soil, right? So the nutrients is leach out rapidly. There's no organic matter. And when I normally talk about organic matter, folks be like, me ain't going to shovel no animal dung to add in my field. But when you start adding it and you see the difference in your crop, for example, in the picture I have there, that's a picture of a butternut squash leaf. And that butternut squash leaf is almost as big as a pumpkin leaf. And if I tell you this, at the college, I don't use any sort of commercial fertilizer or any sort of synthetic fertilizer. I use basically natural fertilizer, and I use certain biostimulant that is also organic. So I would use things like cytokine, I would use Agassiz, and I would use green stem, right? So these are things I would use. But before planting, understand that the soil has a lot of organic matter. So it has sheep and goat dung and rabbit dung added. So look at the size of the leaf of a butternut squash. It's large as a pumpkin. And now you have larger leaf. So larger leaf, that's going to mean photosynthesis, more leaf space for photosynthesis mean not only that the leaf will be large, but it also mean that the butternut squash would be of a large size. So take this into consideration, right? When you use organic manure or animal dung and those sort of things, it feeds the soil. You want to feed the soil so you can feed the plant. When you use synthetic fertilizer, it only feed the plant. And the soil is basically being depleted over and over. So retention of that nutrient is going to be poor because it's easy for it to be leached into the waterways. It's easy for it to be washed out and all those sort of things. So take into consideration, yes, if you're going to add animal dung, it's going to be tedious, but start in one area and you keep adding and so on. You understand? So that is very important. You're going to have a different type of production, larger leaf, even when you grow things like pak choy and you have these large leaf and lettuce and you have these large leaves. So take these things into consideration. The most limited nutrient in the soil is nitrogen. And as I mentioned before, you can add nitrogen this morning. And oftentimes, I'll tell you how most farmers and most individuals add fertilizer. They broadcast the fertilizer and they go about their business. Or even if they do banding, they do the banding around the plant and they don't cover it. They don't think about covering it because one, it's tedious, it's time consuming and all these sort of things. But you're just wasting your fertilizer because by the time sun come out, that nitrogen is going to be evaporated. Yeah, the phosphorus will remain there, right? That ain't going nowhere, but the nitrogen is going to be evaporated, or right? So one of the way of applying these granular fertilizer, if that's your choice, it's ideal to do deep placement. So when you're about to plant, you put some in the hole, add some soil above, and then you plant the seedling on top, right? You know, by the time that start growing, the fertilizer is right there waiting so that it can actually be absorbed by the root tip so you can have proper growth. So you have to take all these things into consideration, right? Another thing to know is the soil pH. The soil pH is very important. The soil pH can actually cause nutrients to be tied into the soil or nutrients to be released from the soil. What you basically have to understand is, sorry, I'll go back to that slide. Understand the cation exchange capacity. The cation exchange capacity is very important. This is where the positively charged particles in the soil, the cations, is being able to release to the negative particles that is found in the root of the plant, right? So some of the things that can prevent cation exchange capacity, the soil type, right? If your soil is of high clay nature, it sometimes do not release the nutrients to the soil, right? Organic matter have a high cation exchange capacity, right? So to release these nutrients to the plants, right? Your pH is going to influence your cation exchange capacity is going to be lower. And normally, based on where your pH are, as I said, it can cause phosphorus to be tied into the soil. It can cause potassium to be tied into the soil. So you must know your pH of your soil. And it's very easy to do the testing of the pH of your soil. So soil testing and monitoring is very, very important, right, for nutrient management. So regular testing of the soil will help to determine whether there's enough nitrogen, enough potassium, the most phosphorus that are found in the soil. So you can do your testing. There are rapid soil test kits. Yes, ACE used to sell them, but you can buy these things on Amazon, right? Rapid soil test kit where you can take some soil sample, then you add some water to it. Try not to use water with a high amount of chlorine because that can affect it. So what you would do, you could take some water and you can actually leave it on your counter so that the chlorine would evaporate, or you can actually boil the water, use this water, and you're going to add some soil to it. You could take soil samples. So now when you're taking soil samples, you can do it in a Z method or a W method. So you would take it at different location, put it in a bucket, mix it up, take some, and then you're going to take that to do your soil test. Add it to the water, then add it to the water with the soil, you shake it, right? You shake the soil and the water together, then you let it settle. Take the pipette, take off some water, put it in the other part and add the capsule. Then you would see the change in the color. That is a rapid soil test kit. And that's the name of it on Amazon, rapid soil test kit. You'll see the change in color. And this is an indication of whether your soil is depleted in nitrogen, depleted in potassium, or depleted in phosphorus, right? So when you know your soil test, when you do know your nutrient level in the soil, then you can take corrective action, because when we talk sustainable, we have to take into consideration using less. Less is more. So if your soil has a high amount of phosphorus, it don't need to add any more phosphorus to your soil, or high amount of potassium, you don't need to add that. So knowing your soil test, your soil nutrient level is very, very important, right? So yeah, 18 essential nutrients that is needed for plant to grow. We know the main three, which is main three is NP and K, and that's what you find on every sack of fertilizer, that ratio NP and K. But when you're going to look at things like biostimulant and so on, you would be seeing they would have things like micronutrients and so on. So if you have access to maybe a Caribbean chemical or a MAFAS calendar, you will be able to see the different types of biostimulant, and those are the things that you can use in your crop to ensure proper growth, right? And it goes back to research. What I can share with you is what I can use, what I do use, and what works for me. As I said, I use Ag-cademy, I use cytokine, I use green stem, and those basically work for me. But coming this semester, I am actually moving from Caribbean chemical, and I'm going to do some test run for some other organic or biochemicals that are coming from MAPAS, and I will give you a feedback. And also there's a local distributor here in St. Vincent for them, and I can share his contact with you if the need be. Right? So nutrient deficiencies, right? So when plant lack the essential nutrient required for growth, without the sufficient essential nutrient, the plant will not grow well. So we could have lacking nitrogen, which you can actually see, it would be yellow. Lacking phosphorus, you can have stunted growth in terms of the root is not growing well, and you can have the plant looking slightly purple, right? A large plant looking slightly purple, especially it's easy to be recognized in tomatoes. Then you have a lacking potassium, the plant look like it's slightly rusting, the leaf look like it's rusting, and those sort of things. So over a period of time, you'll be able to recognize and identify these things. There are some sites that you can use, there are some books, but over a period of time, you will be able, but what your main focus is to do is to ensure that you have a balanced soil, and then you don't have to worry about any sort of nutrient deficiency. Also focus, as I said, focus on the micronutrients. That is very important. And there's a lot of organic or biochemicals that can add. So you have your Calmax, right? You can add things like your eggshell, which is high in calcium. For it to be released very easily, you wash your eggs, you put it, you disinfect it with some bleach, you dry it, then you put it in, well, you don't have to dry it, so you shake off the water, put it in the oven, let it dry, right? Then you can store it in a bag, right? You can crush that, put that in a blender, and then if you want that to be released, the calcium to be released very fast, you add some white vinegar, and then you use that liquid into water and you spray, and you add to your plant. You add it to your plant roots and those sort of things. So that from a simple eggs that you normally dump, you can actually get calcium from that, right? So there's an example of blossom end rot in tomatoes and peppers. They are both the same family, solanaceous family. So yes, it do affect them. And this is because of a lack of calcium in the soil, right? Or availability of calcium, because as I mentioned to you before, you can have calcium in the soil, but it's not available to the plant because the soil is dried out. So having proper moisture in the soil would ensure that they have the calcium uptake by these plants, right? This is an example of boron deficiency, right? And you can use things like boric acid, right? So the plant, the tomato, sometimes you buy tomato and it look like it have a cat face, it look like it's curling at the bottom. It looked like it's been rubbing on something. It wasn't rubbing on anything. This is just a deficiency in boron, right? Example here, if your corn leaf that has a deficiency in sulfur, and what you would add here, things like animal manure, ammonium sulfate, all these things would help to rectify that sort of deficiency. When I'm sending this PowerPoint for you, I'm going to add back in the things that basically disappear so you can have a whole comprehensive knowledge, and even some of the videos that basically vanish, right? This is an example of tip burn. So you have your cabbage, and it looks like the top is just curling in and it's burning, and you're thinking, oh, it's a temperature. No, yes, because the calcium in the soil is not being available to the plant. So this is an example. So this occurring things like kale, lettuce, cabbage. So it's called tip burn. Also, when you have things like orange and pomegranate and those sort of things, and it's growing and it's just pop, it's just that splitting, the skin split, that's another calcium deficiency. So these are two examples of calcium deficiency. I know you would have seen them occurring on your plants and not know what to basically do, right? So when you're going to buy fertilizer, know what you're buying the fertilizer for. It's not a one size fit all, right? So you cannot just go and buy any fertilizer and just add it, right, to the plant. You must know what you're going to grow and what you're looking for. So if you're going to plant sweet potato, the best thing you need is a starter fertilizer, something that is high in phosphorus, right, for root. So you can see some 13, 52, 24, anything around those sort of grade or analysis, right? So look at the fertilizer bag and know what you're buying. So sometimes you don't need to buy certain fertilizer if it's not going to be beneficial to you. It's going to be added to the soil. It's going to be leach, added to the waterways, create disaster, and it's not going to be any beneficial to you. So you're going to be putting money down the drain, right? So focus on the fertilizer grade and the fertilizer analysis. Don't just go and pick up a sack of fertilizer and just add as a one size fit all. So everything going on everything. One of the fertilizer I normally promote as a commercial fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer is Bluecon, right? Bluecon is one that I normally use. I can't remember the grade out of my head, but Bluecon that we have locally here that I can access and I normally use, right? Some other natural source of plant nutrients, we have things like ground coffee, you have your seaweed, and I know there's a bit of argument of the seaweed having high level of mercury and all heavy metals and what's not. I was at a workshop abroad and I asked how to remove the heavy metals, and I was basically shut down because they were using that same seaweed to make fertilizer, and I was basically ignored. But as I said, do your own research. I have used sargassum seaweed in many production. I am looking forward to Caribbean Week of Agriculture to see what new updates that they have, because I remember the last Caribbean Week of Agriculture, they were talking about using sargassum seaweed in sweet potato production that increases sweet potato production by 80%. And I'm looking forward to hear what new research that they have as it relates to sargassum seaweed. So I've put a question mark there for now until I do my further research and hear further knowledge. But if you look at a lot of those biopesticides that you buy that has a lot of micronutrients, one of the number one ingredients is seaweed. So we gotta know what we're doing and do our research and take certain information as a grain of salt, right? Coffee, ground coffee is an excellent source of nitrogen to your plants, and it also, because of the scent of it, it keeps certain pests away. Wood ash, number one thing that for years I've been using, especially when you're growing things like eggplant and you're growing tomato and those sort of things. Wood ash is excellent to put around your plant because it's a high percentage, it has full of potassium. Also, when you add wood ash to your field, especially around your plants, it helps to keep away slugs because it has pieces of charcoals in it, and it normally brews the bottom of the slugs, so the slugs basically stay away from around your plant. Compost, we know how the benefit of compost is helping soil aeration, aggregation. It add nutrients to the soil. It's recycling. It reduce your load, your waste to actually dump. So all your things like your kitchen scraps and all these things, newspaper, brown paper bag, you can actually use all these and create compost to have nice soil to add back to to add back, organic matter to add back to your soil. Then we have things like molasses, very good, right? Molasses has a higher level of sulfur, and you notice with the corn production, because corn is one of high feeder. So molasses has a high amount of sulfur and magnesium and iron and also calcium. So you could add this. So you basically add 2 tablespoons to a gallon of water, and then you add it to your the roots of your plant, right? Banana peel, we already know banana peel is very high in potassium. You can make your banana peel tea. Utilize what you have. You understand? Don't always run to the store and buy. You eat a lot of banana, you have banana, you turn that banana into compost, you turn whatever kitchen scrap you have into compost. I mean, if you're one who are needy and want to have a nice compost bin, there are some nice ones on Amazon that you can buy so you can have a fancy, nice compost bin. But otherwise, sometimes you dig a hole in your field, right? About 6 inches, 12 inches deep, and then you start your layering from your dry, your green, your brown, your green, your animal manure, and you keep adding and you're wetting it as you go, and you leave it to decompose, and then later on you can basically use that to add to your plants and utilize it many other ways. So utilize what you have, right? Some other natural source of plant nutrients, fresh cow manure, as I mentioned before, these are coal manure, cow, sheep, rabbit and horse. These are nice manure that you can actually use. And here you have a ratio of how much N, P, and K that is found in it. Now, chicken is high in a lot of nitrogen, right? More, but it's a hot manure, it burns. So I only add it to compost heaps so it can disintegrate, and then I'll add it back to my soil, right? Just a reminder, organic manure feeds the soil and the plant, whereas chemical fertilizer only feeds the plant. So you want a balanced soil, you will have to add organic manure to it so it can actually feed the soil, so you can have nice soil structure, nice soil texture, and so on, right? These are some soil test kits. This is one of the soil test kits that I normally use, right? It have 80 tests. You can get 80 tests out of it. If you use it properly, you'll be able to test for things like your phosphorus and your potassium. So you would know the color, based on the color, whether it's high to medium or whether it's low or whatever case it may be. It's a nice soil test kit. I can't remember the price for it, but it's found on Amazon for folks who are deeply involved into agriculture production, and you cannot get your soils lab in your country to do your soil test kit. To do your soil test, you can invest in a rapid soil test kit or this soil test kit, which is easy to use, and you can get your information as it relates to your soil, right? Right. So when you have a healthy soil, you will have proper structure, proper texture of your soil. So soil texture has an important role in nutrient management because the texture of the soil can actually hold water or cause water to filtrate. So at the end, I'll give you some easy method to test for your texture of your soil. You can take some soil, add it in your hands, a spoonful, add some water and start forming a ball. And then you can make a ribbon. I will add this sliding back into this presentation that disappear. Based on the length of the ribbon, you can determine what type of soil that you have, right? What texture soil that you have. The other method is using a graduated cylinder, taking a soil sample, adding some to the graduated cylinder, then adding water and shake it and leave it to settle. Now, in order to that to settle fast, you can add some aluminum sulfate, add some alum, and it will help it to the finer particles to settle faster, right? And you can actually measure that, and then you can use a soil textural triangle, which is a bit more, hard, a little bit more time consuming. So it's easier for you as a gardener to take some in your hand, add the water, create the ball, create the ribbon, and based on that ribbon, you can basically determine whether you have a loam soil or a sandy clay loam, or a soil that is high in clay or a soil that is high in sand. Once it starts breaking easily, it's going to be high in sand. And when you have a sandy soil, the way to amend that soil is not adding, it's adding organic matter. Adding organic matter to that soil would amend that soil. And opposed to that, if you have a clay soil, oftentimes people think, okay, I have a clay soil, I want it to be easy for water to go through, I want the soil aggregation to form, let me add some sand. That is incorrect. Once you add sand, it becomes cemented. So same with that clay soil, you would add organic matter, and that organic matter will start to break down and change the texture and create structure within that soil, right? So once you have a soil that is depleted, soil that is sandy, soil that is high in clay content in terms of it's really waterlogged, it's really sticky, adding organic matter is your best option to amend that soil, right? So the future of soil in the Caribbean, soil health is key, right? Sustainable practice is very important for basically long-term productivity, right? So focusing on your soil type, your soil texture, the organic matter that you add to your soil is very, very important. And that is the end of my presentation, not because that was my presentation, but most of the slides disappear. As I said, when I'm uploading this slide to sending it to Latoya, I will add back the videos and the slides that disappear so that you can get the content that was lost, right? And I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Edwards. Truly appreciate your presentation as usual. Really quite a bit of information. So we will now look at the messages. So I'll first go to the chat. Somebody the first one had a message about monkeys. So the first question is, what can we use to scare off monkeys? We have a serious problem in Nevis.
Oh, I'll have to check that, and I would have to research that and get back to you, because to be honest, because we don't have that situation here in St. Vincent, that literally never crossed my mind. I know we have a problem in South Rivers with parrots and those sort of things, so we can use those cities, but in terms of monkeys, I'll have to research a bit more on monkeys' behavior before I can share that answer with you.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Next question, what do you consider to be chemical fertilizers?
So chemical fertilizers are those that are made from harsh chemicals. So you're talking about things like your Blocon, right? Those fertilizers that you buy at the agriculture input warehouse or your fertilizer shop, the granular fertilizers that are manufactured, not the, you would see that they wouldn't indicate that they're chemical fertilizer, but if a fertilizer is organic or natural, it would indicate on the package that it's natural. But those fertilizers that we use in banana production and have been using for years are the granular fertilizer. Most of them are chemical-based fertilizer.
I thank you. Now there's a question here on CMAS, and I was very intrigued with the current research as it relates to CMAS. So for additional information, for reinforcement, I'm going to ask it, even though you answered it in your presentation. Can the CMAS be used as a fertilizer?
Yes, as I said before, I use it as, don't mix up the CMAS with the seaweed. Are you asking about the CMAS or you're asking about the sargassum seaweed? Because the problem we have, or the problem out there that folks are indicating, they're heavy metal found in the sargassum seaweed, right? So yes, we use that as a fertilizer. And I said, if you look at a lot of biostimulant, you would see that one of the main ingredients is the seaweed, right? I would not promote using CMOS as a fertilizer because that's something that we use for our consumption. And I do not utilize consumption, things that I use for consumption as a fertilizer. Now get this straight. When I talk about banana, we're talking about banana skin that you're going to dump. We're not eating banana skin, right? So is it that you're asking about CMOS or you're asking about the sargassum seaweed?
Carol, if you are online, you can clarify whether you are asking about CMAS or sargassum.
Good night, everyone. I don't really know the difference, but the one that is on the beaches currently
Right,
now.
that is sargassum seaweed. Yes, I use it before as fertilizer. There was a lot of presentation in Caribbean Week of Agriculture. There's a lot of research, but there's also a lot of research indicating that it has heavy metal. As I said, I put a question mark there for now. I'm looking forward to this year, Caribbean Week of Agriculture, which will be hosted here in St. Vincent. I would like to see what researchers has come up with as it relates to the heavy metals and the sargassum seaweed issue.
I thank you.
I have a friend who he asked me to harvest it for him a couple of years ago. And he was saying that when I took it from the beach to like wash it.
Wash it to remove all the excess salt. So
Yeah,
what you
wash
normally
it.
do, you wash it. What I did before, I basically wash it, then I soak it in a drum of water. And if you have it around the time when the rain is coming, ideal. After you finish wash it, you spread it out in the yard, let the rain continue to beat it off, and then I put it in a place, let it dry, then I shred it and add it to the soil.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Quite comprehensive. Simple and to the point. Next question. How to increase calcium in the soil?
Right. So if you have calcium in the soil, but it's not being available to your plant, it could be that your soil is dry. You have to do things like mulching, ensure that you have the soil is moist enough so that the calcium could be uptake by whatever plant that you have. Also, if you're not sure about the calcium content of your soil, you can add some calcium to your soil by using things like, as I said, the eggshell, or you can use their things at the plant shop, things like Calmax and many other different types of calcium-based fertilizer that can be found at those plant shops. But most important, if you have animal manure, you're good to go. And animal manure will help to retain moisture in your soil. It will create soil aggregation and ensure that your soil does not dry out, because especially when you're planting things like tomato, once your soil dry out, it's going to have a deficiency in calcium.
I thank you. What about when the citrus has scabs?
That citrus scab, that's the roughness on the outside of the skin. That is sometimes caused by a mite and other things. Not a boron deficiency, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's caused one by mite. And there's something else that causes it, but because I'm not so focused on citrus, I can get back to you with that answer. I don't remember off the top of my head. Hence the reason why I was saying create a Google sheet where I can upload the answers, especially when I'm running into a situation where I don't remember what all causes scab on citrus. Can hydrogen peroxide be used as a fungicide? Yes. So what can you use because your guava leaf is black? Your guava leaf is experiencing smut. It's actually caused by a fungus. What you need to do is actually prune your guava tree and expose it. Expose it so it can actually get some free flow of light. But you can use a fungicide. If you don't want to use a fungicide, you can use something as simple as a dishwashing liquid, and you basically spray the tree with it, and it will actually clear up after a while. But you need to prune it, and if it's in an area where it doesn't get adequate sunlight, that can actually lead to that. That also occur on citrus trees. If you look under the leaf, look for things like aphids, because once aphid is there, it's a vector and it will lead to these sort of sooty black mold. So you can use that same fungicide for the sooty black mold, or you can use something as simple as a dishwashing liquid and water and add it to it. You can even use neem, right? That is one way, but if it's in an area where it's not getting adequate sunlight or proper ventilation, you will need to prune it so you can get proper ventilation.
Hi, thank you. And I think this question is related specifically to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. How can the dust from La Soufrière, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, be adequately used in gardening?
Well, I know from you have a, well, you're talking about the ashes. You can just mix it into the soil, right? Basically, when we had the ash fall, if you were living in an area where you had high amounts, the fine one, understand that, because once you're closer to the volcano, it was a bit more larger, right? But if you're living far away, like the green zone, and you have the dust, you can basically, the ashes, you can basically mix it into the soil. Simple.
Yep. So simply
But
can be just
that
mixing
would
the soil.
already be soaked into the soil, unless it's a situation where you would shovel some and have them bagged up. Then I could understand. Yeah, you just add it back to the soil and use it. Simple.
Thank you. And I've heard some of our members saying that they would like to get some of that soil. Can foods like guava soak be used to enhance the soil?
Guava soak.
That's Carol again. Carol, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, explain the guava soak.
Okay, well, when you want people to do things, I see couple people like they get rotten guavas, soak it in water.
Right, that's the same like the banana. So if you're talking about that, yes, it will add the same potassium and things like the banana. So if you have guavas that are rotten, and that goes back to say any fruit, it's adding back organic matter to your soil. It's simple. Another thing that you can soak in water and add to your soil, which is very, very good, high in nitrogen, your gloricida. You might know it as rain bush or sugar stick, but you feed it to animal. Shade bush, excellent to add back. Add in water, let it decompose, and add it back to your soil.
Oh, that sounds like the fever bush. We call it fever bush. I think that's what we call it, fever bush down.
No, it's a tree that bear pod. And I know it has gloricida. That's the correct name, gloricida. But many other countries call it sugar stick. They call it rainfall tree, yes.
Yeah, that's what we call this. That's what we call fever bush. What we use
So you use for fever?
Fever, yes.
Which country is this?
Saint Kitts.
Okay.
That's the same way. We call it rainfall as well.
Okay.
But
never knew
we
you
call
used it
it
for fever
fever bush.
before.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Carol and Edward. Now,
One
this is
more
a
thing.
question. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Not a farmer again. One time, a friend of mine told me, like the fish gut, when you have fish gut, you can use it. Well, this is was Nevis. Those over Nevis who have the problem with the monkeys.
Because the fish guts for the monkeys?
Yes, when like you put it, you soak it as well, so you get smell well bad. Or you could use cattle skin, because the stinkiness of
Will
the
run the
skin
monkeys?
will keep away the monkeys.
Whoa. What about you? That would keep you away too, because I don't want a farm around somewhere smelling
I was
like that.
about to say that.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, well, you have your farm. I tried it, and it kind of worked, but it's hard for me to be getting those kind of stuff where I am. So, but you have people who usually have fish, or even if it's a piece of cattle skin, it don't have to be much.
Just out of curiosity, do the island consume monkeys?
Yes, we do.
Well, you need to start making some of
speak for
them.
yourself.
You need to start making some monkey ham and all these sort of things. You need to like the monkeys and get rid of them.
They're nearly big like me.
What?
They're nearly big like me. Where I'm living, I tell people I have a monkey farm, even though I ain't have them, because they're in my backyard, like they own it.
Whoa.
They are consuming St. Kitts and Nevis, allow me to say, but it's not as frequent as persons think, where it's a common, popular dish. Okay. It's becoming a little bit more often where persons might see it at different events, but it's not as popular as persons are actually saying.
Okay.
Okay, there are still many Kittitians and Nevisians who do not consume monkey meat. So moving on from the monkey conversation. Okay, that break was needed. Now, this is something I'm sure a lot of persons would like to know because I often see persons having these issues with plants. I have an avocado plant for years. It never bear. What can I do?
Okay, first question. How long is this years?
So, Alberta, can you clarify, please?
Well, as Miss Edwards was asking, how long are you talking about? Because I just had an experience where I visited Barbados and I was trained by this lady, and she was telling me, you know, she's planted this tree for like, I think it was like 8 years or so, and
All
it
right, so
never
8 years.
bore.
Fine.
Yeah.
One. Right, 8 years. Second question, was it planted via seed or vegetative propagation?
I don't know.
Right, so that's what you need to know, because we plant via seed, you wait about 10 years. Once you plant tree crops via seeds, 8 to 10 years before you actually sometimes see any sort of bearing. But if you plant it by vegetative propagation, which is grafting and so on, it will come into bearing within 5 years.
Oh, wow.
But what I urge you to do is prune it and give it some potassium. So prune it and give it some potassium and look for some sort of bearing by next year. So how depends on how old this plant is, because you cannot plant avocado via seed and expect it to bear because it's of a large size or it's 5 years old. You must wait until it's actually mature. If it's not mature, it's not going to get into bearing. It's still a juvenile. Right, so you have pineapple that has been growing for almost 2 years that are very large and have not bear. I don't know what is wrong with you. Sorry. What is wrong with your pineapple? But that does not sound normal. I've been hearing people giving me stories about if you chop the whole tree time, you're going to take 3 years.
I would like to
But
say
I use a
something.
hand spade and I dig, and my pineapple bear within 9 months' time. 9 months. So question, where is a pineapple? How much pineapple plants that you have? One question. Number two, is it located in a place that is intense sunlight? Because it needs some level of shade, right? Is it a problem where you're giving it too much fertilizer? Because pineapple don't need care. Pineapple don't need any sort of care at all. So you have pineapple going on 2 years and it hasn't started bearing as yet. Something wrong. Also,
Well, that's what I.
And my pineapples were started from tissue culture, real small. So, and if they bear within 9 months, that is going to tell you, and most of your pineapples started from what, a sucker or one of those slips. So it should be bearing already within 9 months.
I have something to say.
They have not.
I
They
have
have not
something to
bear,
say.
and they're very large. They're very large plants. They're in a cool area. I don't trouble them. I don't do anything. I don't fertilize them. I don't water them. Nothing. I plant them there. I forgot them there, but nothing. I have no pineapples. And if you see this, I will have to send you a picture. You don't want to see the size of my pineapple plants, and I have no fruit.
But you can also do pineapple induction, right?
I have something to say.
You're from which country?
I'm from St. Kitts. You
All
made
right.
a statement about avocado. I planted an avocado about 4 years, and it bear. I have 2 tree bearing avocado. Because when I
seed?
planted it, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. When I planted my avocado, I put some sheep dung, rabbit dung in the hole, and I gave them fertilizer. And all my mango tree was bare, mostly 5 seeds.
Mango
and
or
tree,
avocado?
And the avocado and mango. All the fruit trees on that farm is bearing. So that statement about it by 10 years, that's not true.
Fruit trees, once you're planted by seeds, up to 10 years before they start bearing. If you plant by vegetative propagation, they would get into bearing earlier, within 5 years. Yep. As I was saying about the pineapple, the lady from St. Kitts, your plant shop, do they have any sort of chemical to induce pineapple induction? This is where you could put carbide in the heart of your pineapple, and once it have 30 mature leaf, which yours basically have more than 30 mature leaf, it will induce flowering, and then your pineapple will start fruiting. So that's an option that you can do if you want your pineapple, because I can't understand the 2 years and there is no sort of pineapple.
Mishka, this is Kathy from St. Vincent with the pineapples.
So you're the person would have pineapples for 2 years and it's
Yes,
hasn't there?
please. Yes, please.
Area located so I can see them.
In Harmony Hall.
Out of my reach. Send me a picture.
I will send you a picture.
How much pineapples you have?
I think it's either 4 or 5.
Oh, a little bit of pineapple. Hmm.
Yes, it's a little bit, it's my little backyard thing.
All right.
But I will send you a picture of them.
All right. Any other questions?
I
My
have a
name
question
is
wrote in the chat, Mishka. Miss Edward, sorry. I have some, I planted some peas, pigeon peas, and I went into the garden yesterday and I just touched them and realized there's all these little white flies. And I picked some kale, and when I picked the kale, I saw the same, well, I call it white fly. I'm not sure what it is. So I
On
was
the
kind of
cane,
like
you have
wondering.
aphids. On the cane would be aphids.
Right. So they flew about. So I was kind of
But that's
wondering
white fly.
what, if anything, I can use, especially on the peach tree. I was so excited to have peach trees. Now, I don't know.
For the peach tree, you can use neem, but it's ideal if you had a mini mist blower. But I know you might not have a mini mist blower and it's going to be taking you a longer time just to use one of those hand spray. But you can use neem. Ideal for white flies. You can even use hot pepper if you have access to hot pepper. You can grind it up, add it in some water and spray.
Okay,
That
great.
works well.
Thank you very much.
For the
Thank you.
for kale, I suggest that you use some dishwashing liquid, one of them that doesn't have any sort of oxy, preferably Dawn, or one of them that has a lime squeezy, one of those, and spray under the leaf, and after a while you would see them disappear.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I thank you. So I'll take one more question out of the chat and then we'll go to those individuals who have their hands raised. Final question from the chat. When you spoke about soil health principle, you made mention of keeping the soil covered. Are you speaking about using things like newspapers, cardboard, and agrofabric?
Right. So when we're talking about ground cover, your ground cover could be any of these. Sorry, when you're talking about mulch, your mulch can be any one of those. What we're talking about cover crops is different. So which one are you asking about, the cover crops or you're asking about mulching? Mulching helps to actually conserve moisture. Well, both of them helps to conserve moisture and reduce, keep weeds down, reduce the weed growth. Both the mulch and both the cover crops. With the cover crops, after you harvest, you can till it back into the soil. That is adding soil organic matter. Depend on which type of mulch that you use. If you're using something like inorganic mulch, it doesn't add anything back to the soil. It only helps to retain moisture and keep weed down. The other things like newspaper and what's not, yes, that is organic matter being added back to the soil.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll now go to those persons who have their hands up and we'll start with Cynthia Spencer. Cynthia, the mic is yours. Kindly
you
ask
very
your
much.
question.
Thank you very much. I'm really enjoying this. I've never farmed in my life, but I want to be a farmer. So, Ms. Edwards, I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, I've been living in a 6,500 square feet of land. And it's 10 years I'm here this year, and I have a problem with my land. It holds water. Everything I plant is getting rotten.
So it's a waterlogged soil.
Because when you dig all the way down, it's like, well, dry clay-like when you go all the way down.
Okay. Go ahead, the next
Okay.
question.
So what do I do?
So what you want to plant stuff so you can do raised beds. Once
Yeah,
you
well,
have
I've started 3 raised beds as soon as I started visiting Helen's daughters every 2 Saturdays, and I've been inquiring. So I did that last week when the classes started.
Okay, so you can do raised beds and you can add things like compost to improve the soil texture and the aggregation in the soil. Because it's waterlogged, it could be a heavy clay soil. And you said when you dig further down, it's dry. So you want the soil that is underneath to actually hold some level of moisture. Organic matter is your best fix. So you can add compost, you can add animal dung. You have access to things like sheep, goat, and rabbit dung.
Well, I have, I'm so happy there's a man who's tying about 6 cows now. If you see me going and collect the stuff now.
Right, so add it to the soil.
Yes. Number 2, I guess you can do my number 2 and 3 question. No, slugs and snails now attacking everything. My plants, my leaves of because I planted a few things and they now starting to flourish on one side of the land because I did some compost there on one side of the land just to test. So I have all my macambu, green figs and ripe plantain growing there. I have the right-hand side of the land is like nice and the left-hand side, nothing can grow.
So you have slugs, right? You said that you have
Yes,
slugs.
the big snails also, the giant snails.
Giant African snails?
Yes, I do have that too.
Which country is this?
St. Lucia.
Yes, please keep them over there. Thank you very much.
I'm
Does your
collecting them in a
does
bucket
your
and killing
ministry
them.
provides slug baits?
Yes, I bought some yesterday.
All right, in my presentation, there's something that called Nimbicide that is excellent for giant African snail. I would see if I can send it. That's why I'll send it to you and you post it in the chat. I'll look for a picture and I'll send it to you. I'll send you even a documentation on it. Excellent for giant African snail. The active ingredients in it is neem and it works well for the giant African snail. It has been working in Trinidad and I've seen research and documentation to see that it has worked for the giant African snail. So if it's working for the African snail, I guess it will work on the slugs as well because, yes.
Because
It's
one more, the other person's lot before mine, it just has some nice yellow flowers, about 6,000 square feet. And if you see the mountain slugs about 6 o'clock and they coming onto my fence.
Miss your friends.
So it's I don't know who owned that land, but it's
I mean, these slugs, you're talking like this is a lot of slugs, something like the whole monkey situation. So this is like slugs just walking about like they own the place.
Yes, they all on top of the yellow flowers as if, you know, and they coming over on my wall, they climbing over on my fence. I don't even like frogs. That's why I'm putting up all my stuff in beds, in containers. Now, I'm not even going and dig on my ground anymore. I'm buying buckets as if I don't have space. I'm doing like in the city now. I'm putting everything in buckets. I have also my what do they call this fruit? Dragon fruit. I have now. I've been putting it in buckets and they're doing well. I'm just tired of my ground, so I'm investing in the buckets and everything. One more question.
Go ahead.
One more question again before you go. My soursop tree, I cut it on top. It has been bearing, but in the middle has something black and a lot of ants in it. What do I do? Even my neighbor, we complaining about
this. Same sooty black mold because maybe it doesn't have enough air going through the soursop tree, and it has a lot of aphids. Aphids is one of the vectors of sooty black mold. So the same thing that I mentioned a while ago with the soap water, or you can use neem. But at the same time, prune it so that they can have proper ventilation of air going through your fruit trees. Even though things like mango and those sort of things, you may not see the sooty black mold, but when your mango is ripe, you're going to see things like anthracnose, which is going to be some black spots on your mango. And that is also a fungal disease, so that you have to ensure that your mango tree is pruned, proper ventilation is going through, or you have to spray it with a fungicide. Right? So back to the snails. Before I even start talking about the snails, I'm going to go back to biosecurity measures, right? And I would always say this, we are our own worst enemy, right? Because a lot of us travel to different country, we find something and we smuggle it into our country, not knowing what we bring in it. So we find a avocado that eat nice in this country, I take it home this seed. We find a mango that eat nice, I take it home this. We go to somebody's garden and we find a nice flowers or whatever, and we smuggle it into our suitcase and we bring it home. So we are our worst enemy. We brought a lot of these giant African snails into our own island from other countries, especially places like Trinidad, because a lot of people like to smuggle in poinsettias. We're not even taking into consideration things like the soil. The soil is going to be a host for many eggs from any sort of insects and pests and all these sort of things, and they smuggle them in. And then we see the giant African snail taking over our household because they do eat concrete, They eat concrete. And when you touch them, you can get meningitis, right? And we're worried now about all these things because we all was, you know how much people I know smuggling things like orange and different plums that they like, trying to get it grow, and you're wondering, so wait, how he growing macadamia? That's not native to us here. And then we see different pests, invasive pests come, and we worried about that now. I always tell my friends, stop smuggling things into your country because you're your own worst enemy. You are the one bringing the pests and the disease into your own country, and then we're going to bawl about it afterwards, right? So for your slugs, I suggest that you get some slug bait. You try the Nimbicide because that do work. The piece of land next to you that has all the slugs, you have to think about yourself as well and go over and add slug bait there and spray it as well. Otherwise, even if you take care of your surrounding, it's still going to have slugs coming over, and you're going to have giant African snail coming over. So you have to spray your area and spray next door so that you can reduce these giant African snails.
Thank you so much.
That heads up about that giant African snail because I was thinking about taking a trip to St. Lucia. I'm going to ensure that my slippers or whatever I wear is properly disinfected before I even enter back my, well, I might just show you the slippers in the airport. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay. Thank you. So we are going to take 4 more questions, and these are the 4 individuals who hands up in the chat. This is the order: Viola James, Ferdella Joseph, Tamisha James, and Anne-Marie Olivier would be the final question for the evening. So Viola James, the mic is yours. Viola, are you with us? We seem to have lost Viola. So we'll move on to Ferdilla Joseph.
Okay.
Ferdilla, you may ask your question.
Yes. Good evening, Miss Edwards. You mentioned about when
Ferdilla, okay.
sorry,
I think
my
you cut
mic
out.
Miss Edwards, I was asking, you spoke about compost earlier on in the presentation. When your whatever it is decompose, how do you apply it to the soil? Do you mix it with water? How do you apply it?
All right. When you add compost to water, you're creating a compost tea. So you can add your compost to water, use the tea to fertilize your plant. Now, after your compost has been broken down and it's ready, you can just add it to the soil. You can add it as a mulch. You can add it back into your soil where you just till it back into the soil, right? But as I said, there's 2 options. You use it as a compost tea or you just till it back into the soil.
All right then.
Okay, Viola, are you still with us? Viola? I think Viola is having some issues. So in the meantime, we'll go to Tamisha James. Tamisha, you may ask your question.
Good night, Tamisha from St. Vincent. I have a question. I have some passion fruit that's been growing since last year, October, but worm keep on eating the leaves. What can
Caterpillar.
I use? Yeah, some black caterpillars.
Okay.
What can I use to get rid of them?
All right. So you have a lot of caterpillars on your passion fruit, which is something that is somewhat normal in certain areas. But how to control them? Neem is. I know it's going to sound like I'm using neem for everything, but neem is very good in controlling these caterpillars. Also, what you can do, sticky traps. Put some sticky traps in that area, right? So when the butterfly, the moth goes in that area, they stick on it and they don't get to, reproduce. So put some sticky traps. If you cannot buy the sticky traps, you can use something like anything yellow, right? And you're going to put some Vaseline on it, or you're going to put some oil, preferably Vaseline. They will stick onto the Vaseline a bit more quicker than the oil, because sometimes with the heat, the oil just basically run off. So if you have any old Arm & Hammer container, cut it up, create some sticky traps and put it in around that field. So it can reduce the pest load.
Okay, thanks. And the neem, would just rub the oil on the leaves,
Oh,
or?
no, darling. You mix the neem in some water and you add some dishwashing liquid so it can become emulsion, and you spray the plant.
Okay then, thank you. And can you repeat the whole gloricida method with putting it in water and
So you
you
just
leave it to
take
soak?
gloricida branch, you cut the branch, you strip it off, and you put it in some water, drum of water, you cover it down, leave it for a while, let it decompose, it's going to rotten down, and you're going to use that water to add to your plants that is high in nitrogen.
Okay then, thank you. Any ratio water to bush ratio, or?
I don't have a ratio because I kind of just do these things by just looking at it. So like, let's say, for example, you have one of those blue drum, right? You quart it with the leaf and you fill the rest with water.
With water. Okay then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Viola, your mic is actually open. Do you want to ask your question now? Okay, so we'll then go to Anne-Marie then. Anne-Marie Olivier, you may ask your question.
Good evening, Miss Mishka.
Fine, yes.
Yeah, okay. I have a lot in my area. I have a lot of these red millipede.
Okay.
And in the earth, when you dig, there's something. Well, I know we call them something jackaman or something. So it's like a little worm with a little pointed arrow or something, and it will spin around if you hold it up and stuff like that. What should I do to get rid of these pink millipede, red millipede? Are you hearing me? Hello?
1 second, we seem to have lost Miss Edwards. Give her some time to rejoin, please.
Okay. Our internet is bad tonight, man.
Okay, so we'll just wait for Miss Edwards to join. She's actually currently trying to reconnect. Yeah, she said she have lost internet. So she's going to join, rejoin. If she's not successful, we'll have to call it a night.
Okay.
Okay, her first attempt was unsuccessful. Okay, Miss Edwards would like to apologize. Unfortunately, her internet is not connecting. So please accept her apologies as well as my apologies for this happening. We have really had some unstable internet connection during this session. However, we will be having Miss Edwards again this coming Thursday. And so we'll definitely find some time for questions. So please, those persons, Jennifer Marshall, I see you still have your hand up, and other individuals who did not get to ask their questions, please, we'll try for this coming Thursday. And I implore those of you who have already had quite a bit of question time, try to allow your sisters a little time to ask their questions, please. So shall we try on Thursday for those individuals who did not get to ask a question for them to get to ask it then, please. So ladies, I want to thank you again for joining tonight. I must say, I must really applaud you guys. It's a large group and I don't really have much issues with muting mics, a lot of unnecessary disturbance. I must say you guys really have it together and I want you to encourage you to keep it up. It was a pleasure again facilitating tonight. I'll see you guys on Thursday, God's willing. Have a pleasant rest tonight. Goodbye, ladies.
Okay,
Good night, everyone. Thank you for
Good night.
Bye, bye.
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, night.
Bye.